Chicks dig confidence. Fun, strong. We gotta hit that window where we can pretend you're at least one of those things.
I am Grant from Screen Rant. Thank you both so much for taking the time to chat with me. I watched Succubus earlier today, and it was quite the blast from start to finish. It was really innovative and so many twists and turns. Rachel, I'd like to start with you, and then Brendan, what was it about RJ's script and your characters that really sparked your interest to be a part of it?
Yeah, I think I was really at a time in my life where I was curious to kind of play in my darkness, and the script definitely was going to give me the opportunity to do that. And then also just like everyone's so amazing that was working on it, I really wanted to be a part of it.
And then Brendan, how about for yourself?
I was actually the lead in Daniel's thesis at USC, and we've stayed in touch over the years. And he wrote the film, or the first draft of the film, during the pandemic. And was trying to figure out whether that diegetic in-world cameras of phones and laptops and baby monitors would even work. And so he invited me over to the house, and he would rewrite a scene, and we'd workshop it like a play. He'd shoot some stuff, cut it together, see what worked, see what didn't, invite me back a couple weeks later, and I kind of slowly stepped into the realm and the character of Chris over Daniel's writing process, really.
I love that. And I love the way the movie really does play with both, in universe cameras as well as just an actual floating camera. It really melds together very well. And I'd love to hear actually from both of you, since, so much of this film is both of you sitting in front of, either a computer screen or an iPhone screen and having to act. What is that like? Rachel, again, if you'd like to be the one to start, and then Brendan, what is that like trying to, really embody your character in this moment as they're having a conversation via the screen?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I have primarily a social media and modeling background. So I'm really used to filming myself, vlogging, or whatever it might be. So I think that made it a little bit easier for me. There's obviously the added components of memorizing my lines and being, in front of a bunch of other people. All of those things were added challenges. But yeah, I think it was such a cool way to tell this particular story, and it looks so cool on screen.
Yeah, for me, it's really that physicality and that return almost to kind of classical cinema, where it's really filming theater. It's these long single takes. The first 20 pages of the script is just me with a phone and a laptop and the baby monitor, choreographed through the entire house, kind of like I'm going through a haunted house as a play in one go. And we did that 2 times so that the light would actually change behind me in real time throughout Chris's journey. And then similarly, once we got done puppeting these kind of phone cameras, Rachel and I were actually holding the Alexa at certain moments during our intimacy scenes to, again, put that screen in between us. And the idea of kind of performing that kind of red void scene in one go, kind of 16 pages, like a one-act play, and then picking it off from kind of different areas, really let me live and immerse myself in the world of Chris, and made the cinematography and the lens of Chris not just the lens of the character, but I was actually physically motivating the lens of the storytelling.
I love that. It sounds like such a great symbiotic relationship you had with sort of the technology, which is all too often nowadays. And Rachel, I'd love to turn to you next. So Adra's voice is such a very key component of her character. As as she starts to regain her power, it becomes a little more, it becomes louder, it becomes more confident. And I'd love to hear sort of what it was like finding her voice, from beginning to end throughout this production.
Yeah, that was an interesting process because it did evolve so much. And I think it evolved, as she's gaining strength, but also kind of as she's deciding how she wants to try to manipulate Chris. So sometimes she's a little bit more like sweet and innocent. And obviously other times as if he's kind of getting away from her, she's pissed off and she might become a little bit more sassy. So there's a lot of ways that I got to play with the voice, and also a lot of like breathing. We did a lot of breathing in the ADR, which I think really added to the whole creepiness of it. So yeah, it was really fun.
It really does add an ominous layer to the movie that really heightens your guys' scenes together. And Brendan, I'll turn back to you next. We've talked, you talked a little bit about embodying Chris, and I think one of the most powerful aspects of his character is his trying to repair his relationship with his not ex-wife, but sort of separation wife. And what was it like, not only getting to the heart of that side, or getting to that part of his heart, but also working with Olivia to really, nail that dynamic via the screen.
Absolutely. I think the real kind of key into Chris's character is that first scene with Adra where they FaceTime for the very first time, and he just wants someone to talk to. He's ultimately a character that just has immense loneliness and immense shame. And I think that gets sprinkled across. What's heartbreaking is there's so many opportunities for Chris to connect with the people who are already in his life, his mom, his friend, and Sharon, his wife. And I think what was beautiful and somewhat method is that because there was so much, we shot the thing in 15 days, hyper fast, intense filming, we're doing these long takes. I'm so ingrained in Chris of trying to map out where am I setting down phones, what are the lines, what are these long sections. In some ways, having Olivia and Derek as my wife and my best friend on set with me, in some ways as a performer, kind of broke me out of like, hey, let's go get dinner. Hey, we're in Montana. We should see pretty things. Like, in some ways, building and feeding into those relationships and those proper human connections. And I think ultimately the whole storytelling, both in the storytelling itself of the film, but also the narrative, is this disjointedness and that choice between the digital self and the physical self.
There's so many interesting modern themes to be pulled from Chris's story as well as Adra's story. I love how at the start you really do lean into sort of the domestic violence that we often learn too much about nowadays, but that it sort of works as a manipulation tool on Chris. And so we talked a little bit about finding the voice, Rachel, but I'd love to hear sort of what was it like, also physically, obviously you're trying to seduce him, but what was it like, via your face as well as via your body, really trying to harness those emotions as you're trying to really sell this story to Chris?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. Like, there was an evolution in how I was choosing to use and move my body and show it on the camera. She's very like shy and like, come save me and help me, and kind of in this shell at first. And by the end, she's like full power mode, like owning her shit. And yeah, that changes a lot throughout the performance.
So in talking about her full power mode, I won't go too far into spoilers, but we do get to see sort of her base form in this film, her succubus form. And I'd love to hear, was that actually you in all of those makeup and prosthetics? And if so, what was it like, getting to have that put all on you and then see that in the mirror?
Yeah. Yeah, it was me. And it took like a good 6 hours of prosthetics and everything. It took a while, but it was done so well that I looked in the mirror and was actually a little freaked out. I thought maybe I was a little bit evil until I looked in the mirror and I was like, no, this doesn't really feel like me at all. But yeah, it was really fun. And also I was definitely ready to get it off by the end of the day.
Did you find that that sort of helped fuel your performance of her being in full power mode, or did you already feel that through the evolution of the shoot you were ready and you felt that within her?
Yeah, I think that it was a cool way to get to embody it, but I also felt like just in the human form, there's a lot more that I can do to almost evoke that kind of evilness, just getting to use my own physical appearance to do that. When you're a demon, that kind of is what it is. That is the evilness. So.
And then Brendan, I'll turn back to you. Chris also has some interesting moments in that you have to just sit there stoically for long stretches of time. And that sounds easy, but I'm sure it's not from an acting perspective, especially as you have to let a tear roll down during some heartbreaking scenes. What is that like for you on the performance side, you know, having to capture these very different layers and actions while, you know, being so stoic?
I mean, in some ways, because filming was so intense on the other side, those were my easiest days where I was like, oh, I just sit in the chair and I zone out. Great. But then, of course, you know, Ron's in those scenes with me, and I won't give any spoilers, but he is doing quite a few things to me. And so having him rough me up a little bit while I have to maintain kind of a comatose stare was certainly an acting challenge all on its own.
I can imagine. And so I'm sure also, you know, Ron Perlman's also a legend in the industry. So was it hard for you as maybe a fan of his to also have to sit there and not directly act with him more, you know, as he's giving sort of this very, not menacing, but certainly not nice hearted performance?
It was a joy working and kind of in all of his scenes. I think my favorite part of working with Ron is that I'm kind of in the background, hidden in the scene or behind camera for all of his kind of phone scenes with me. And so that was my real opportunity to get to actually perform opposite Ron. And everybody's first day on set was actually using a phone or using a device. And so Ron's first day on set, he walked into the baby room with the crib and the baby monitor and looked around and went, where the F is the camera? And Dan had to run in and go, this is a real movie. There is a real camera. It's just, we're doing this weird thing first. And so watching Ron really kind of adapt to the circumstances and bring his performance, again, no spoilers, but, you know, he opens the movie in such a strong, dynamic way that really shows his gravitas as a performer and what makes Ron Ron.
That opening of the movie certainly threw me off for what was going to come for not only this film, but for Ron's character as well. So yeah. I love that it's sort of structured that way. And so you both mentioned it a little earlier, and I'd love to hear from you both, but there are quite a few intimate scenes, not only between each other, but also individually, whether it's bathing in blood, as we see at one point, or just actual, you know, intercourse. And I'd love to hear sort of what it was like working with each other as well as with the director to really have that trust and feel that safety of, you know, allowing yourself to be this vulnerable during production.
Yeah, I mean, the bathing in blood scene honestly is one of my favorite. It was very cold, but, you know, Daniel and everyone on set were constantly checking in with me and making sure that everything was good. And I felt very cared for in that sense. And I felt like I could really just focus on, you know, the scene and getting done what we needed to get done. And we were also, you know, in those more intimate scenes, having like a massive camera in between us. That was so much more just about like directing my energy into the camera a lot of times. And yeah, and Brendan is a great scene partner in that. Like, I couldn't have asked for anyone else. So yeah, it was really nice.
Definitely. I mean, intimacy is always like a dance or like fight choreography. Like, it's just so refined. But then also you add into that the clunkiness of having to motivate camera and be with camera and sometimes actually moving camera. So it really did become almost mechanical in so many ways. And I really learned so much watching Rachel in her scenes where she's getting to motivate camera in her seduction to the phone and to Chris online, and choosing, it's not just, you know, front and center, you know, deliver, it's her then choosing what she reveals when. And I think so much about this film in having, you know, Rachel in the prosthetics and then Rachel doing her creature embodiment in her natural embodiment. And I think that's what's really beautiful about the movie overall, is that there's this purposefulness to when we're choosing to see what wins.
No, I really like, you know, this is a movie that could have easily have been something raunchy and dirty, but I love how thoughtful it is with all of that kind of stuff. And I see I'm almost out of time. So before I let both of you go, I'd love to hear, you know, what is one of the big things you're really excited for audiences to take away, be it the overall atmosphere, be it the performances, be it the blood that we see as the film goes on. What is some of the big things you're really excited for audiences to get to see?
Yeah, I mean, I think just for me watching it just as a whole, it's honestly just really beautiful and it's really fun. Like I was just hooked the entire time. So I think, of course, there is potentially lessons to be taken from the film. Be careful about our actions online. But I really just hope that people have a good time watching it and just appreciate what everyone did.
For me, I think we hear the kind of commiserating these days of like, no one makes anything original anymore. Everything's the same. And I think this is such a unique way to tell a story, and everything that Daniel and Jimmy and the ensemble brought to this. I think it's such a weird, cool indie film. And there really is nothing else like it. So I think in many ways, just getting to plant that flag of like trying something really funky and new.
Mm-hmm.
I really do love how it's both a secret screen life movie as much as it is a straightforward horror movie. And I think people are going to really love it who give it a chance. So I can't wait to get that word out there about it. So thank you both so much for, again, taking the time. I really do appreciate it. I had such a great time with this movie, and I can't wait to keep the word alive about it.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thanks, Grant. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Take care.
I don't want to hurt you. I love you.